So hi, we're here
Hello.
today. We've got Pablo Power on the line. Nice to see you, Pablo.
You too, as always.
Nice to see you, and thanks for making time to talk with us. We're gonna finally get to talk to you and let everybody know a little bit more about your background and what you've been up to in New York for the last several decades as an artist. And then we're gonna talk about the world class that we're doing together. So we had a bunch of guys, chime in and tell us they wanted to know some specific things about your background and kind of what you've been up to. So why don't you at least go through some of like the recent history of who you are in New York as an artist, and what is this whole situation of street art, whether something's being a street artist or it's graffiti or it's public art, tell us a bit about that.
It does, as you say, it goes back decades. But I mean, what I'm doing now is still maybe visually doesn't resemble. There's some elements there, but a lot of what I'm doing is still like really in my mind, at least, like directly connected to my early times as like a young teenager, or if not like the work that I'm doing, the things that I was seeing at that point that you still see now, which are, my work started in the street, the stuff that I was most serious about. I mean, I did have the opportunity to go to like a really advanced public art and design high school. So I had that academic and that that level of motivation from early on. But the stuff that I was really more passionate about in my own work, which is what has kept me going since then, does go back to those really early days of being a teenager, working in the street, writing on things usually not sanctioned, doing murals sometimes sanctioned, and then those went into commissions. Like a lot of times I'd see a place I wanted to go by myself or with other people. Always was blessed to work with a really tight knit and really talented and motivated group of people as well. But whether we were doing stuff together or what was usually the case, normally we would see the location, have the work in mind, have something sketched or totally spontaneous, and just go do it. Sometimes permission was asked for, and as years went on, then it became like, okay, well, now we also want you to buy the materials, and then it became like, well, now I kind of think that I would like something for my time as well, and then it became people seeking you out and bringing you in and having everything already prepared. But that that was a long arc, I guess. But basically, in the process of being out of doors all the time, working with people, having to be very aware of your surroundings, because like I said, very often you were not doing this stuff with permission, and you weren't always sure what the reaction was going to be. But one thing that really impressed me and affected me immediately early on is that the reaction was immediate. Like you knew if you weren't supposed to be there, somebody would tell you. If somebody liked it, they were going to come up to you and from all the way down the block and come right in your face and tell you that you better get out of there, or how much they love it, or that it reminds you of their cousin who was in this New York 80s and there was always a story, and it was always really immediate, and you always got to know a lot of people. If you were there, you're like your hands and your eyes and all of your senses were embedded in your surroundings, partially for your own self-preservation, but it was really inspiring to see all this happen. And that's what I fed off as time went on.
Do you mind if I ask the question? I love it because obviously you mentioned you have a formal arts training background from high school, college, you went to some of the best places in New York. So why take that out into the streets? Like, what was your thing? Like, what was it that, you didn't have to do that, but you kept being drawn to that, and you basically started and built your career in the streets. You didn't have to. You had all the correct connections to keep doing that indoors. So that's fascinating. What was that?
Well, I mean, I'd say one thing, the blessing or the curse of it was the fascination with hip hop and graffiti. That was, I mean, I was coming into it, and I was born in '75. So I was first aware of it, like I say, like scratching a little fingernail on the surface of it in probably the early 80s.
Right.
Kind of started dabbling in the mid 80s. When I say dabbling, like really, really just, with a little Sharpie and hiding in,
Well, you were a child. So.
Yeah, somewhere where nobody would ever see anything. And there was no idea of I mean, maybe there was some idea of trying to fit into this broader thing, but I had, I
You were tacked
basically,
to it.
and as I got more serious and saw more, in those really early days, I lived in like a little surfer town in Southern California when I was in elementary
Aha.
school.
Nice.
I take trips to LA once in a while with my father, who was an artist, and he was, peripherally like involved, and but would take trips and go into LA to do things with his artwork as a sculptor. So there I would see more serious things and a lot more. But then I started going to Miami, I'd say towards the end of early elementary school, and spending summers there in junior high school, moving there for high
Yeah.
school. At that point, so I was coming in, and now it seems old school. People will call me old school as
Oh,
I'm
right.
like
Yeah, well.
honored and humbled to be thought of that. But that's more of
Right.
I'm just old, I think, really is what it is. But
That's what I keep saying.
I was like so many waves past like what is in reality is the real old school. But at the same time, I got to New York, and suddenly I was here. New York also was in a whole nother wave of street culture, artwork in the street,
Yeah,
writing. So many things were having another resurgence that I think had
that's right.
kind of waned since or maybe the later 80s. Things became more and less fashionable. Downtown went through another generation or two of tastemakers and culture evolutions, and then suddenly the stuff I was into was coming back to the forefront again. So then I went from like a reemergence of this stuff in Miami right into another beginning of one in New York City, and the timing was great. Also, back in those days, if you wanted to find out about something, you basically went there, or you spent a lot of time trying to find magazines or writing people mail or stuff. So there was no way to find stuff even at your local library, let alone even an idea of the internet. So like I
It's so
came
true.
basically to a place
You had to actually be into stuff and go do it.
go there and find it and knock on
Yeah.
somebody's door and meet them, or find a flyer that said their name was going to be in a place on a date and show up there and go, hi
Isn't that
buddy,
crazy?
like, I love
Crazy.
you, you're so cool, I want to meet you. And you kind of had to be that guy. So suddenly I was in New York,
Yeah.
like the birthplace and the genesis of everything that I was totally overwhelmed and by
Yeah.
and consumed by. So I was here for that.
And it's everywhere.
Yeah. Yes, I did have the school, and I was maintaining that with some level of seriousness, but eventually just being in New York City and meeting all the people that I wanted to meet, seeing all the things that I wanted to see, participating in all the things that I had wanted to do,
Yeah.
was
That's
basically
awesome.
became the day-to-day consumption of everything I wanted to do then.
So through that whole system of activity and vibe, you were already involved in some collectives previously and doing a lot of work with other artists downtown and other places. Do you want to talk to us a little bit about that experience or those experiences?
Yes, again, it was like also one of the things that probably a major thing that kept me going as a young artist, and even I don't get a lot of a chance to do it now, but was that collaboration, having groups of like-minded and talented people to push me, and hopefully maybe be that driving inspiration to other people as well. But we had a real unique symbiosis where we just worked together, had the same thing. We're inspired, not only inspired each other, but we shared this inspiration in similar things. I was kind of able to drop into a group of people who were already really active and influential in Miami, which they had the name, the Inkheads crew, which was pretty much, it was going in the direction of doing some exhibitions and more public mural commissions. But basically what it was known for at that time, what we were known for, and what I came into it being known for was, just doing stuff out in the street. Again, mostly without permission, but it's kind of those were our, I guess, advertisements back in the day.
Yeah.
Our social media, just going out there and doing it and letting people see it, take pictures of it, and talk about it. So I would, again, very like-minded, and those guys were definitely like pretty much the same age, but again, when you're 17, 18 years old, a couple of years of, they're a little older and a lot more serious than I was. So like seeing them,
that's great.
pushed me up a lot. And then
Yeah.
we all came to New York one by one by one. So we were
Oh,
able to
okay.
maintain that connection and of like living together, sharing studios, working together. And that was a period of a few years that was really intense, and and really productive.
Mm.
And then we connected with another group here that was from all over the place, the Barnstormers, which is, kind of when the Inkheads crew was, um,
Mm.
moving out of doing a lot of the illegal things and work in the street. Definitely focused, more on doing exhibitions and just raising things to another level of connecting with people and bringing things together. Um, I guess also going just a more commercial and academic route as well. We connected with a bigger collective that had started a couple of years before we met them here in New York, called the Barnstormers, which was from all over, started by an artist. David Ellis was kind of like the glue that pulled all these people from New York and Philadelphia and South Carolina and all places all over the place all together, in North Carolina rather. But yeah, so yeah, then we kind of connected with them, and that was a whole nother, if we were 8 or 10 guys, that was, I mean, guys, definitely a couple ladies involved with in our crew as well, from abroad and from Miami and from the West Coast. But the Barnstormers then was 30 people from all over the place, all different kind of styles, all very like-minded, and we all were able to still, whether it was, on 1 or 2 occasions, we actually did have really almost everybody together. But it was always just amazing to share that thing where, without even having to say anything or sketch a whole lot or say, well, you better stop your section there and I'm going to do this, and too much red or not enough blue. You just did whatever you did. And you sort of, you nodded and looked, and you just knew it just was going to be okay in the end. And so then we, as a smaller collective, dropped into their larger one, and it still just worked. And it was, I got another couple years of, motivation and inspiration out of that. And, even being here now, again, having a chance to meet some artists in other countries and other continents and all over the world. It brings me back to those days of just feeding off that sharing experience. And and if you hope inspiring somebody to step up and do something new, come out of what they do, and also definitely grabbing out and grabbing onto somebody else and learning a new thing, hearing about something new, bringing that collaborative spirit back into the studio, on to the next collaboration if it presents itself.
For some reason, street art always has seemed to be very aligned with collaborating with, maybe it's because of the crews, the graffiti crews, hip hop crews. There's this sense of like creating a small group of like-minded people was very a part of the culture. Somehow or another within fine art and the more traditional arts, it's not so much the case. Maybe, you can think about, I don't know, Picasso or Van Gogh or people that were peers, and maybe they'd hang out and like have drinks or coffees or something, but it wasn't so much this sense of creating a crew, you're extremely into that, and you're really motivated and excited about that process, which is great for us. Obviously what I'm trying to do is build this like global crew, right? Using what we have access to now, since like back in the days, it literally was like you had to be at the galleries, in the streets, at the parties, or you didn't find out about anything. You had to be in person, you didn't know people, you had to be everywhere, talking to everybody. Like, it really was like a full-time job. It was a lifestyle, which is why it became a lifestyle for most of us, right? Now it's wonderful in a sense with the internet and with all the things that have gone on, and with COVID and some of the good and the bad that's come out of this, right? It's like everybody's connected now, almost everybody. And we're also seeing the trajectory of how some people are becoming hyper connected, and then we're kind of losing people off the sides that can't keep up, right? And so that's where, with the 2050 community, what we're trying to do and pulling you into that is saying we love this idea of crosstalk, cross-pollination, the dialogue, the cross genre, bring your genre with this genre, this location with that location, and let's mash it up. Let's build a big crew so that you can, as you've said, we want to lift other people up as we climb, right? We don't want to see these people falling off the sides of this thing. But there's also people that are these hyper connected, hyper successful, hyper aware, these people that are obviously in real life and virtually in the right place every time. They're virtually and in real life at the parties, at the galleries, where the movements are happening, where the things are being developed in such a fast and hyper exponentially like connected way that we need access. We're like, hey, like let's build a chain here, right? So it's pretty exciting to have someone like you involved, because that you're bringing that motivation, you bring that excitement to everything that we're doing. It's cool because, as you're aware, we have artists that we are particularly, we're looking for the challenging environments. Everybody's done the Miami, London, Tokyo thing. I'm definitely much more interested in finding the talent and the people that are in these challenging environments and vulnerable situations. We're looking at, people that are still living in crisis and conflict zones, things like that, refugee camps. Everybody's very well aware of that. So it's very cool that you are, you're pretty amped up to be involved in a new challenge. Working, I think we're up to, what do we have, like 5 languages? There's like Portuguese, Arabic, English, French. I know I missed, Polish. And Polish. So we're going to try to do this collaboration for this world class, huh? So I appreciate you bringing your motivation to that. Is there, what are your thoughts on this so far?
I mean, I find it exciting, and in very much the same way that the collaborative aspect of being able to work together with artists and like-minded people in general has always like really fed me. But again, just any opportunity, which is what I have continued to do with my work and my motivation, the direction of my work is, I mean, the ultimate goal is to, maybe for me, I mean, to do the same thing, but just to reach a broader audience. And by reaching a broader audience, not just like be the, I'm out there in front of more people, but like for what I want to do, what excites me is like reaching a broader audience means to be able to bring more people from more different places, of maybe different mindsets, of different experience, into places where they can come together. So to be in the middle of that in a bigger group, in a wider span across the globe, or the whole earth, even in this one iteration, is amazing, I think, and very exciting. And also, just the part also of bringing awareness of the some of the situations that other people are going like against all odds, and creating art in, and trying to maintain something positive in, and maintaining their creative spirit as an antidote or like a barrier to like what all these things that are going on around them, social or political climates, or conflict zones, or whatever it is. That's like even taking myself further out, because that's something that's been very close and really at the front of what I've been wanted to do for a long time, is also talk about the places where I was creating these works and these installations in public years ago, occasionally now still, but just being in cities in the U.S. where I've done a little bit of work abroad, out in the street and in public, but I mean, some of the places that you cross the street, or your neighborhood, or the other side of town, or like the figurative or the literal other side of the tracks, and suddenly you're like, wait a second, what's going on this side of town, or what's going on this streets over? Like, this is not what everybody else over there is living. You'd be like, and they're not even looking over here. They're not paying any attention. Like, how are these both New York City? How are these both Miami? How are these both Washington, D.C.? It's like, something's not right here. Like, this should not be happening within such proximity, and with total disregard of this neighborhood or this community, or so to be able to think of that, that's been a major motivation of what I've wanted to do, is
it's awesome
of crossing those boundaries, like literal and figurative, and thinking of like, well, why is this happening? What can you do to bring those together, and to equalize the conditions that people are living in, rather than like, oh, well, don't go over there, don't look over there, it's dangerous, it's this, it's that, oh yeah, can't be bothered,
Right.
So, I mean, to think about
But
again.
we're like, why is it dangerous? I want to know.
Yeah,
I want to
exactly.
know. And how do those people feel about it? Are they cool with that?
I want you
What's
all to
happening
know,
over
so
there?
that maybe that there's a way to like, again, equalize that to where, it's not the case anymore, where like that over there is so different than a few blocks away,
Yeah.
let alone talk about people that are living in all out full on war zones and, political persecution where you're going to disappear
Right.
in the middle of the night for making a painting or printing a document and distributing it in public or
Right.
something like that.
Right.
There are a lot of awful conditions that people live in, right here
Yes.
on the
Right.
other side of my neighborhood or other side of town or anybody's town
Right.
here in the US, but let alone, you're not really probably going to disappear in the middle of the night for making a newspaper or a painting,
Oh,
so to
precisely.
think about
We're
that
very
and bring
lucky.
yeah.
Yeah, we have massive luxury in this country that you kind of almost basically do whatever you want, and there's gonna be an audience for it. No matter how weird you want to get weird, you're gonna still have followers just to be able to make some money. It's a very unique situation, what's happened here in terms of being more individualist society or whatever have you, but definitely a lot more freedom here, even though we have a ton of issues that we're still constantly hashing out, and this is part of it, but I love it, and it's very cool working with you because you get that sense of taking responsibility in your art and in your lifestyle, and taking that lifestyle and saying, okay, how can I broaden this, and how can I use this? What's the leverage do I have? Everybody has some kind of leverage that they can use to lift someone up with them. And so you seem like you're constantly looking for that, and you're really willing to start. You're working on some other projects now that are very cool with the Center for Court Innovation. We're really excited to see what that's going to be in the next week. You're saying, I think that's launching out. We're going to be hearing more about that. If you want to maybe give a plug for that, that'd be awesome too.
Yeah, for sure. That's going to be, we're going to actually be creating an art piece, a mural in Bed-Stuy, a couple of blocks away in Brooklyn from where I live, Bedford-Stuyvesant neighborhood, with a lot of thoughts and writings of the question was, what would something that you would like to see created or reformed in your community? And
I'm sure it was extensive feedback.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that one, and there are an organization that is a parent organization of a lot of smaller community groups. Is one that I first became aware of that's literally a block away from where I live here in Bed-Stuy. Save Our Streets Bed-Stuy. And so I was trying to contact them, and their information ended up circulating through Center for Court Innovation, who I was not familiar with.
Okay.
But I think their short, like one sentence description is reforming the criminal justice system from the community up. So basically creating opportunities in people's communities, creating conditions in the community where people are going to be left with more choices than to resort to things that are going to get them wrapped up in the criminal justice system, which at a certain point you're done. And
makes sense that an ex-graffiti artist would be interested in those types of issues.
Yeah, well, having mostly through my own bad decisions or and a little bit of bad
all
luck.
aware.
I mean, I've spent collectively, a significant amount of time for myself, but I've spent a lot of short amounts of time within that system, and again, also, by choices of things that I did, mostly involving putting artwork in places that it didn't belong, or that somebody else didn't ask for it to be put in. Was definitely an insight into, you're the one guy in there that everybody's going, well, what are you doing here? But just looking around and just seeing all these other people that were in there that really had no business being in there either. It's been really refreshing and inspiring and encouraging to see people, so many more people suddenly aware of all of the conditions that land people in jail and communities that have no resources whatsoever other than to, really a road that's going to lead to some institution or another. So it was really amazing for me to connect with these with this
Yeah, it's a very cool project.
Because if there ever is anything near and dear to me that I feel like there needs to be awareness brought into, because that for people that end up in jail or end up in institutionalized in one way or another, there's almost always a way that they could have had an opportunity earlier on and they wouldn't have gone down that route. To me, not through artwork for the most part, but it's also, definitely creating creative opportunities for people to better their lives, and undo some of the damage that's been done by, racial and economic and social neglect, and, outright, malignant policies and attitudes and everything else that has been done here for a long time. So if there ever was anybody that I'm happy to help in any way I can, it's them. So I'm excited to do it, and also to do a mural in my neighborhood. I haven't done a mural in New York City in quite a while. I did a quick one last summer when all the all the storefronts were boarded up, particularly on Soho and places that had some damage to them within some of the people that were opportunists in the protest movement and using it as a time to break into stores, things like that. Serve their own agendas with that one, as far as I'm concerned. But then in an overabundance of caution and fear, everybody all over New York City, particularly Soho, put the boards up on the windows. So there was a campaign to get artists to cover those up while the businesses were closed for that and for COVID regulations. So I did a small, quick one-day mural last summer on Broadway in like Spring Street, of all places, which was a lot of fun to be able to be out there and do some work.
It's very visible spot.
Yeah, to be able to do, and it definitely was, served in my mind this same message that I would always want to promote in my work, let alone working with another organization like Court Innovation. But to do it 2 blocks away from where I live is gratifying on a whole.
Yeah, definitely.
As time has gone on, I definitely want to be more focused on maybe what the principal, like, final outcome is and working towards that rather than throw good stuff out there and it's all going to come back and it's all, that's great and that's valuable. Like everybody should have a little bit of that.
Maybe that's maturing in your process as an artist and a human being,
Sure. I mean, I'd like to see everybody with like a little bit of that inclination would be helpful, a lot more helpful to everything in the world. Sure. Yes. But as time goes on, you want to pick one thing here, one thing there. So
I feel like everything you just said shows up in your work, in the topics of your work. I don't know if you would agree. This is a prompt. I would love for you to talk about the topic of your work and the type of materials, context. From what I've seen most of your work, and it kind of marries really well and matches really well everything that you're talking about as far as processes, local processes, what's happening to people, who's being marginalized, why are they being marginalized. There seems to be a richness of that theme going through a lot of your work. I don't know if would you agree? It seems to come across to me. And if you want to talk about some of those things that you do work on and the materials that you prefer working on for those reasons.
Yeah, subject wise, I mean, the materials definitely followed. I mean, some things were, as I am going, sort of like conceptually or directing work towards a more concise focus. I mean, some of the materials over time, I definitely sort of even some imagined and I think invented some, definitely researched a lot and consulted with people a lot to invent some image transfer, which I guess some of the things you can see in the background here, some of those, but a lot of that even incorporates in with, I mean, the materials came from working in these areas that were totally forgotten or overlooked and abandoned. And just a lot of the age and the texture and the layers of things that that which you look at, and to me it just that age and that decay was just like emblematic of the overall idea of just being overlooked in these areas, these whole areas that have been left behind. You can look at the buildings and these surfaces, and so that I definitely like that was I was working on those all of those first years of the work that I was doing outdoors. Pretty much it was always on those kind of surfaces inside those buildings or tunnels or train tunnels or wherever it was going to be. It was going to be somewhere that was in those kind of abandoned, overlooked,
decaying
areas. So a lot of it when I came back into the studio or began working in the studio, even in the beginning more, that was just so ingrained in my whole psyche and my whole process. So it started as just trying to replicate some of that, working with the handwriting and text and layering things, and rather than sometimes I will work with a bold text statement, usually more so in you're doing stuff outdoors, but in public. But in the studio, it's more of a trying to tell like a more well-rounded story. So it's not always so direct and bold. There's layers to history and to the things that happen in with whether it's a place or a person or a community. It's almost never going to be encapsulated in one statement or one word. So a lot of the stuff that I like to start that conversation with is the layered nature of all those things and all the nuances. It's not all one way. It's not all everybody does this or everybody does that. There's a lot of layers and nuance to it. So, it's not all the text and all the writing in there isn't necessarily meant to be so obvious. And, it's so easy to read. It's, catching bits and pieces here and there, building layers. And a lot of layers as well harken back to, the years of use and decay and of things in all those buildings. And then again, adding another layer to it, for a period of time, being out in these areas and again, like I said before, getting these reactions, meeting people so directly, because you have no choice. You're right there across from somebody's home or block or out in the public for an hour or a day or a week creating these artworks. As you start to realize more and more a lot of the stories that are around you and the people around you, I kind of lost interest in, because there was always a documentary aspect of doing the stuff outside, because at night, if you were going to do it under cover of like shadow and darkness, you would have to go back the next day and take your pictures. So I always had a camera. I was always going back the next day to take picture just of the wall, just of the stuff that myself and or my friends did together the night before.
Right.
And as time went on, I would kind of pull back and then realize, like, well, what actually is this whole building? Like, what's going on here? Why has this building been sitting like this for so long?
Right. Like, so interesting.
There's anything like, well, why is half of this neighborhood look like this? Like, how did this get like this? Like, who are the people that are living around here?
Right. Is there someone living here? Yeah.
Yeah. So then it became more like, well, actually, yes. Well, who is? So then it be more like taking pictures of the
issues
and the people that live there and some of their stories. How they get by and what is their life all about? Because again, it's a rare opportunity that somebody comes out and that doesn't live on that block asks. So and the people a few blocks down, they seem to not care. So again, like, how can we cross these worlds together in some way that could be helpful to somebody?
So is that how the photography became a part of your work?
Documenting, and then getting into like a little bit
Makes
of video
sense.
as well, and working with video stills. But
interesting.
Yeah, so I began
out of a necessity, basically.
So adding another layer, another dimension to these narrative works that I do. So then then also it became working with new ways to mix those together, because I always liked the process and the outcome of the abstract works that I had done in the studio for a long time or for some amount of time, but then just wanted to add that other dimension to it in some way, to again just to add another layer to the story and another visual key, because not everybody will respond to an abstract painting or take the time to look in and see that there's writing in there, or look at maybe if there's a little bit of something collaged, and that at certain points I've done, I would take things from places and put them in there, collage them in, but it's like, well, I like these two things individually. The photos to me are really important. Again, like they're very direct, because here is this person, like they live on this building or in this block, where this is where I did this work, or where all this community is living. And so it's another way to bring it together, because then somebody can see the photo and that'll strike a chord in them.
Yeah.
Maybe it wouldn't, or maybe vice versa. Together, to me, it just became a more well-rounded way of depicting the whole narrative, which is what ultimately I was
Right,
trying
it's
to.
the storytelling part of it. Yeah, and then you're telling a richer story. Yeah, more of the details of the story. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, I think a lot of people wouldn't know that there were so many layers to someone like you as a 17, 18-year-old person going out bombing, as it was called in some respects, depending on what you were doing. I'm happy to hear what you're saying, because it definitely puts a little bit of thickness to what is a person thinking when they're going out and doing that stuff, and why they're doing it, what compels them to continue. And it's not just well, there's a lot more to it. There's a lot more to it than just like a teenage angst. It could possibly start that way, but it's really fascinating when hearing the story of how that developed for you and became this quite actually layered motivation, and that there's a lot more to it. And so I think when people encounter these, I don't know what you guys call them nowadays, but these unsanctioned pieces of art, these installations, which I still really love, I hope that they will take more time into considering what is the person trying to say. Why did they choose this place, this spot? Was it convenient? Did something happen here? Or is it meaningful? There's so many questions you can ask when you see these types of spontaneous artworks, and that's part of the reason why I still love them. I love the opportunity they present to tell a story or be provocative of a question, and even as a bystander, as a person who is using the streets and the trains and whatever, as a pedestrian, I love to see how it affects the space. Gives me maybe entertaining or something beautiful. There's so many things to it. So it's really cool to hear your background on that. I think, we'll do future talks with you. Obviously, our world-class participants are going to get their private sessions with you as they're building the course and building the final project that you guys are going to be working on. But we can do a few more public sessions, because there's so much for you to, there's way too much for us to go over, the storytelling and then the materials and, just the street art stuff. There's a richness of your history there. So I hope we can, we'll do some future talks and get some of that information out. Hey, so it was really great having you. Thanks for making the time to talk with us. And we'll definitely schedule another session so we can get in some more of this like really great detail. So, but thanks for today. And it was great seeing you.
Yep, been a pleasure to be here. Looking forward to building off this more.
Thanks, Pablo.